In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can fight back against PayPal. I've also done a video with how you can do that for eBay, so I definitely recommend that you check that out first, because chances are if you've got a dispute with PayPal, it's because you've had a problem with eBay, and really in the first instance you want to try and resolve whatever problem you have with eBay if it's a specific problem with eBay. But in this video, I'm going to focus on PayPal. And the good news is that it is actually easier to have disputes with PayPal for two main reasons. Firstly, PayPal is an ADI, which is an authorized deposit taking institution. It means that they are kind of like a bank. I mean, they're not really a bank because they don't lend money, but they do take deposits. They hold money. That makes them a financial institution, and therefore they are regulated as a financial institution. The key benefit to that is that you can lodge a dispute with a financial ombudsman service. And that's definitely a good thing because there's no fees involved with doing that. And so you have that extra layer of sort of legal protection. And it does level the playing field significantly if you're going to have a dispute with PayPal. The other advantage that you have in your favor with PayPal is that the requirements are actually less strict. So, for example, if you have a dispute on eBay, where a common problem that I've seen time and time again is a lot of companies, even like the national postal carrier, they don't track things properly. So they might actually say that they'll scan it at the closest post office, but they don't actually scan it when they physically deliver it to the address. Or even they do that, but they might not actually, it might not actually be visible on the sort of public, tracking website because of privacy concerns or some nonsense like that. So on eBay, like eBay will blackmail you, they'll bully you, they'll do everything they possibly can to support the buyer. But with PayPal, actually, all you have to do is prove that you sent the item to the registered address. So even if it doesn't actually arrive, or even if the buyer is claiming that it didn't arrive, you actually are still protected under PayPal's seller protection. And that is a key difference. Now, PayPal will wiggle their way out of that. So there are instances where the buyer will say, well, I didn't receive the item. They could be lying. It could be the truth. We don't know. And you as the seller say, well, I'm covered under seller protection because here's the proof that I sent the item to the registered address. And what PayPal will do, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, is they will still refund the buyer out of the seller's pocket. Whereas really what they should do is say, well, the buyer is protected, the seller is protected, and so we'll pay the buyer out of our own money. Now, of course, they don't want to do that because getting money out of PayPal is like getting blood out of a stone. So they absolutely don't want to do that as a commercial profit-making entity. But that's what should happen, and that's part of the reason why you pay a fee for accepting payments via PayPal. I mean, you can see that in their advertising that I have up here, that they actually do stress that there is security for buyers and there's security for sellers. Okay. But again, sadly, they won't do it, and they just expect that 99% of the time, sellers will just take that on the chin and move on. But of course, if you're watching this video, you're smarter than that, and you can know that that just ain't gonna cut it, right? The other actually quickly important note on the example that I gave is that sometimes buyers will actually say, they will say, can you send it to another address? And you should say no, because if you send it to another address and there's a problem, which often, dodgy people like that will request it, then PayPal will not cover you because they'll say, well, you sent it to an address that was different to what was registered on the account. So be careful of that little scam as well. So there's just a typical example where you will lose a dispute where you shouldn't. So and sadly it does happen, and buyers know that they can abuse this. So let's say you sent an item, you sent it to their address, and for some reason it wasn't scanned properly, or the scanned information isn't showing. PayPal request information, you send them the shipping label, you give them all the information that they request, and PayPal will find the case against you. Now, the first instance that you should actually do is is send an email to this email address, which is business-support@paypal.com.au. There'll be a similar one if you're dealing with PayPal in another jurisdiction, and just say to them that that you reject their decision, that you want to appeal it. Be very clear why you are appealing it. Keep it very factual. Stick to the terms and conditions. Stick to their policies, and try and get it resolved that way. In all honesty, it's very unlikely that you will. They have very low trained staff attending these kind of email addresses, and they'll just send you stock standard copy and paste responses. The next step that you can do, and this is actually a necessary step, and I'll explain why in a moment, is to contact AU Executive Escalations at paypal.com. Again, there are similar email addresses in other jurisdictions, and this is basically the highest sort of level that you can take with a complaint for PayPal. Now, they are quite slow in getting back to you, so you won't get a prompt response. They actually promise a response within 48 hours. I can tell you it never actually happens. But to their credit, PayPal will, in most cases, they will give you a response, and it will actually have a legitimate name at the bottom of the email, a first name and a last name. So it's a lot better than eBay, where you just get these really stock standard emails. There's no name on it. It'll be from one of those like no reply email addresses. So it's definitely worth contacting AU Executive Escalations. Make sure you're very clear. I know you're angry and you're emotional and whatever, but they don't know. They're not specific. They're not up to date with your specific case, right? Like PayPal is a very large organization. So give them the dispute number, give them the details, give them a timeline of what's happened. Explain to them clearly why you're disappointed with the outcome, or why you disagree with the outcome, and see if they will resolve it. Now, again, sadly, even though you will get a response, it's quite rare that they will actually resolve it at this point. And again, because it's email, it's very hard to sort of have that back and forward. Whereas at least if you're on a phone conversation, you can sort of have that conversation in real time. But it's worth a try. And the other reason is that you actually have to do this if you're going to go to the next step, which is, well, you could potentially go to the media. But aside from that, the next step is to go to the financial ombudsman. Okay. Now, an ombudsman is, so in Australia, they actually recently changed the name. When I say recently, I mean like actually a couple of years ago, as of the time in this video. It used to be called FOSS, the Financial Ombudsman Service. It's now called AFCA, which is the Australian Financial Complaints Authority. Any jurisdiction, if you're in England, they have a similar thing. If you're in America, they have a similar thing. The name doesn't really matter. It's a financial ombudsman. And what an ombudsman is, it's sort of like it's like an intermediary step before you go to court. So the next step really is to go to an administrative tribunal, or to actually go to court. Or you can actually, so this is before that. So you don't need to hire a lawyer. There's no legal expenses. You don't have to pay any money to lodge a case with the ombudsman. And the reason that the ombudsman actually exists is because financial companies are really important. If you have a dispute about your phone bill, that's kind of serious, but it may not really be life-changing. You might have a dispute about a bill that's a couple of $100 or something like that. But with financial services, you might have a dispute that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and can be life impacting. So, as you can imagine, banks and financial institutions are very heavily regulated. And actually, organizations like Financial Ombudsman are actually funded by the companies that they're regulated. And so it's sort of like a compromise where these companies, they say, okay, well, we'll fund and we'll pay for an ombudsman service. And the benefit to them is that there's slightly less regulation around that. So it's sort of, it's not self-regulated, but it's kind of a balance between the two. So financial ombudsman's, at least in Australia, as far as I'm aware, is not actually government funded. It's actually funded by the companies that pay or that are regulated. And that is in some ways, it's a bit of a problem because there is kind of a conflict of interest. Because if you think about it, you're going to AFCA with a dispute against PayPal, and PayPal actually pays in a indirect way. They pay the salaries of the staff of AFCA. So, but anyway, that's how the Ombudsman service works. That's how it's funded. Sometimes it's depending on your jurisdiction, it might be an annual fee, it might be a case by case fee, or a combination of the two. But what will happen is when you lodge a dispute with AFCA, so it's not that difficult. You go in, you say what the dispute is about, as in what kind of dispute it is. Is it like insurance or is it payment service, etc. Obviously, for PayPal, it's payment service. You actually state the company. You say what your dispute is, and that's pretty much it. It should only take 15, 20 minutes, half an hour at tops to fill it out. As I said, there's no expense. You don't have to put your credit card details in or anything like that. And what will happen is AFCA, and part of that is you have to actually say to AFCA that you've tried to resolve the dispute with the company that you're complaining against. So that's why you have to contact the executive escalations to say, look, I have tried everything I could. I gave the company ample opportunity to resolve my concern, and they haven't, and I'm going to the ombudsman as a final resort. So what the ombudsman will do is, in the first instance, they actually won't do anything. They won't actually look at the case. All they'll do is they'll contact, in this case, PayPal, and they'll say, we had a dispute from such and such an individual, and this is their dispute. And PayPal will have 45 days to respond to this. Now, one thing that I want to make very clear, if you're going to do this, if you are going to lodge a dispute with AFCA against PayPal, get your money out of PayPal, because there is a reasonable chance, I'm not saying 100% chance, there is a reasonable chance that PayPal will suspend your account. And if they suspend your account, you can't get the money out. And it's a horrible feeling. So make sure that you get all your money out. If you need to leave money in there because you're running, a store on eBay or something like that, by all means leave, it might be 50-50. Okay, so it's not, yeah. But there is definitely a reasonable chance that PayPal will suspend your account. And they really play hardball. And they don't really have a right to, but they just want to show you who's boss. And certainly if it's the second or third time that you've lodged a dispute with the ombudsman, which you're absolutely entitled to do, then there is actually a much higher chance that PayPal will suspend your account. And it's really just an intimidation tactic. But yeah, again, if you're running a store on eBay, you've probably got, tens of thousands of dollars in PayPal, and you really want to get it out of there. And I'm speaking from experience. We actually lodged a dispute once, and it was over the busy Christmas period, and we did have tens of thousands of dollars in the PayPal account, and we didn't know, like, we were still having orders coming through. We were fulfilling those orders, so we were sending items out, and we had no idea if we were actually going to get the money out of the account, and it went to like some special team with PayPal, so you can't talk with them directly, and they ask for this and they ask for that, and they want invoices and they want all sorts of things, and they just run around. They try and scare you and they put you through the ringer. So again, it's really important, if you're going to lodge a dispute with the ombudsman, make sure you get ideally all the money that you can out of PayPal in case they take that action. So the ombudsman will notify PayPal that you've lodged a dispute. PayPal have 45 days to respond to that. And what will typically happen is PayPal will wait near that limit. So it might be like 42 days or 43 days. And they'll send you an email, something along the lines of, we didn't do anything wrong. We absolutely disagree with your claim, but you're a good customer, and we're gonna refund you the money as a goodwill gesture. It's nonsense, because they will only do that if they know that you have a valid case, and they know that they'll lose the case with the ombudsman. So my advice is, if they do that, then be nice and be professional and say, okay, thank you. But I would also even just subtly put something in there saying, well, I feel that I have a strong case. I feel that I had a strong case here, and I believe that I legitimately am entitled to that money, because they'll say it's a one-time gesture, and if it does happen again down the track, which frankly inevitably will happen, especially if you're running a store, you don't want them to sort of say, oh, well, we already gave you a one-off gesture. You can say, well, no, I was refunded because I had valid tracking and it complied with your terms and conditions and blah, 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 blah. The other thing that you should do, in my opinion, is, and this is the problem with PayPal, is there's no consequence. And if I go back to my example before, it's very easy for them to just say that in the instances, as I said, that the buyer and the seller are both protected, that they just say, oh, we'll just refund out of the seller's pocket, and the seller's just going to put up with it. And they're not going to, 99% of people are not going to go to the extent of the ombudsman. And really, it shouldn't get to that point. And so you should actually go back to PayPal and say, well, it's not just good enough that you refund me the money that you should have anyway. I've had to wait probably a month for the case to be resolved with PayPal. You then found it against me. I then had to deal with executive escalations. I then had to file a report with the ombudsman. I then had to wait 45 days. That's wasted a lot of my time, and I expect some additional compensation. And you really should demand that. And in some cases, PayPal will actually pay it, because, again, they know they screwed up. They won't admit it, but they know they screwed up. So now, if PayPal decide that they are not going to offer you to resolve it, and they say, okay, well, sure, you've filed a case with the ombudsman, we're going to fight you. They won't use those words. Then what happens is it goes to a case manager. And so an individual will actually review the facts of the case, and they will make a preliminary assessment. So they'll basically say, well, I've looked at everything, and I think that either you're in the right or PayPal are in the right. If they say you're in the right, then they will say, well, this is what we expect PayPal to do to fix it. You can either accept or reject that. So you might say, well, yeah, okay, I'm in the right, but I actually want additional compensation, which you actually can put in the original complaint. If they find against you, if AFCA find against you, then the preliminary assessor doesn't actually have the final call. So it actually goes to the final assessor, and then they actually make the decision. So if they find against you, you got nothing to lose to say, well, I reject it and I want it to go to a final assessor. So you can do that. Now, sadly, the Financial Ombudsman Service actually used to be pretty good. Like, some people might say, oh, look, it's kind of a government organization and they're a toothless tiger. But actually, the Financial Ombudsman Service used to be pretty good, and they'd be pretty thorough. Sadly, I've noticed a significant drop off in quality once it became AFCA, because what actually happened was there were three different regulatory bodies, of which the ombudsman was one of them, and they all got rolled into AFCA. And so you have people that are not specialists. You have people that don't really know their stuff, and as I said, the quality has it really, you can notice a very distinct difference. And I have to say that in recent years, or pretty much since AFCA was created, they have been pathetic. It's not an understatement to say that. Um, so if you can't get it resolved with AFCA, the other thing with AFCA is they can actually only award damages up to $5,000. So if you have something more than that, then you're probably going to have to go through the courts anyway. But here's some information. So this is the person at PayPal who actually deals with the ombudsman. That is her direct line. So if you call that number, she will pick up. It won't go to like a call center or anything like that. She's a real rotten one, this one. And anyone who's run a store on eBay or had dealings with PayPal, I'm sure know this individual. So yeah, she's pretty bad. Just to give you an example as well with the kind of people that you're dealing with on AFCA. So here's an example of one of the case managers. You can see as well the I mean, it all kind of looks legitimate, but then when you actually look up this guy, you can see that he actually studied arts and humanities, German literature and history, philosophy, and behavioral studies. And he built a career as a manager in a bookstore. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but then why is someone like this dealing with complex financial contracts and disputes? And it really is almost laughable at some of the things that they do. So, for example, there was a case, it was a chargeback case. I don't want to go into too much detail, but for those of you who know what chargebacks are, you only have 180 days to lodge a chargeback case. Someone did that beyond 180 days. It was actually like 2 months beyond that. And PayPal took the money, charged a fee, everything. The dispute went to AFCA, and AFCA actually ruled in favor of PayPal on the basis that they said the dispute is actually between the seller and the merchant, i.e. Visa or MasterCard, or the buyer's bank, and therefore basically PayPal had nothing to do with it, which is absolute nonsense, because when you sign up to PayPal, your contract is with PayPal and the terms and conditions are with PayPal. And so even questions like, okay, well, who is this counterparty? Who is their bank? Who is their merchant? What are the terms of those contracts? And AFCA just ignore even basic fundamental questions like that. And the other thing is the cases, they drag on and on. It's not uncommon even for cases to drag on for over a year. So again, I hate to say, like, you got nothing to lose by going through AFCA, but honestly, they are a toothless tiger. And even right at the top, the chief operating officer, you can see here, this guy actually is actually quite malicious, and actually, I don't want to go into details for legal reasons, but yeah, just a real sinister individual. And frankly, this is his wife, by the way, who also works for the government. They're the parasites of society. They're the plebs of society. I'd hate to imagine what someone like this is on. And I don't know. They're either grossly incompetent or they're corrupt, and I don't know which is worse. And it's really sad because, as I said, the financial ombudsman service actually used to work and actually used to be, um, a really good layer of protection for consumers in Australia. But anyway, failing that, then essentially you got to go the legal route, and if you want to do that, then absolutely, that's something that you can pursue. You should never be intimidated by large corporations and bullies. They are, it's not PayPal, it's individuals like this. You can see she's not scary. She's just some fat lady who has a family and probably lives in a crappy house and gets up and has coffee just like everybody else. And yeah, don't be intimidated, don't be scared, stand up for your rights, do your homework, do your research, stick to facts, and fight for justice.